Hey, welcome back, Mike. How are you?
I'm swell. How are you this evening?
I'm good. Welcome back to all the folks watching. And this is Pop Culture SquadCast Live. Mike and I are going to have a special guest tonight that I'm very excited to talk to. I caught up with him at Heroes Con early last month. Time flies. 2 months ago. It was in June, and we talked
How
about
many conventions have you been to in the last 2 months?
really only two. Two. I've had a slow summer for me.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's funny though because I had that conversation with myself this afternoon, which I often have conversations with myself, and I was trying to figure out what my schedule for next year because Awesome Con I got something about there in March this year, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do there. Then we're definitely going to go back to Terrificon, so I would love if you came up there. We're going to do that next year. It is the month after uh, San Diego, so maybe San Diego. We'll see. Yeah, so cons are going. Baltimore's coming up in a month,
That's
a month
true.
from today.
Yeah, something like that. I think
Uh,
it's
it's a
like the
month from
6th,
today.
isn't it?
It's the 8th, I think. I think it's the 8th.
Whatever.
Um, I know the yearbooks are being proofed. I heard that from a tall birdie. Um, and so that's all coming up good. I want to Sherry's watching us and saying good evening. So hi,
Hi,
Sherry.
Sherry.
Um, I want to kind of start off before we get to our guest and talk about one of the, your most recent column, which is the Brainiac and Banjo column that is that's on Pop Culture Squad, posted yesterday, and I'm going to put that into the chat. People can go check it out when they want to. And you raised an interesting point that I don't necessarily disagree with on principle and purpose, but personally, I was so offended that I had to change my outfit to wear this
Oh,
shirt tonight. So this is actually one of my favorite shirts. It's a obviously the take on the Spider-Man No More with Dick Grayson not becoming Robin anymore. So the concept that you raised was that the proliferation of of sidekicks and multiple people playing the same role in comics has become um, problematic, to say, for lack of a better word. So why don't you go into that?
there are way too many people with the same name and by and large the same abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo, none of those people are unique or special or amazing. And I think I said in my piece that it undermines our sense of wonder, which is the most important thing the reader brings to the comic book reading experience and to movies and to books and television and sex and everything else.
Right.
But you got to have that sense of wonder, and I think that we do a lot in our society to discourage that, to drive that down, to make people not wonder and just play along, just accept. Now, I'm not laying this at the feet of the proliferators of superherodom, but they're joining in. What
So,
is unique about Robin?
well, what is your opinion of the character of Robin and what he brought to Batman?
Uh, I don't know what he brought to Batman. I mean, he succeeded. He came in, was very successful, and hung around forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes us think that he was successful. And he certainly was not unsuccessful. But would Batman have thrived without him? We don't know. Did Batman thrive when Dick Grayson left the cave?
So yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
mind it. I thought those were good stories. When Dick
I mean,
wasn't
he
around.
became Nightwing, and that was seriously
Well,
cool.
right. I mean, there's a whole there's this conversation could be a couple of books. But the concept of Dick becoming Nightwing was a great story. Um, it was the hero growing up. You know,
Right.
the unbelievable life he's had as a teenager, a boy, and now he's a man and taking his own place in that world, in the world he lived in. That was a great story, and he has gone on to become, in my opinion, one of the greatest superheroes of his age. Um,
We are in agreement on that.
However, the need to replace him, I don't know that it was there. I I will argue that the need to replace Jason was even more forced.
I agree.
Great story. I liked the little twisty stuff that Marv did with that, and Marv did it, and but Damien is completely unnecessary. Not that he's not good, not that he's not a good character and has his own abilities and has his own, story, but I didn't need that. I didn't need that. Stephanie is just she was she belongs on the women in refrigerators list for how she was used as Robin. Um, but so were you there? Were you there? Were you at DC when that happened? When Jason died?
Yes.
What was that about?
Um, Cynicism, but not on the part of DC. The fact of the matter is, we don't know who really won that telephone contest.
Really?
That's absolutely true. And I had some experience with DC and 800 numbers because we did that when I was there in the 70s.
Hmm.
And I knew that you could actually hit, I don't know if this is still true, but back then, a maximum number of calls. I know that because in the 70s, the phone company called me and said, listen, we burned out a transponder. You got to buy more lines. I said, well, I don't have budget to buy more lines. So why don't you just send up a repairman? And yeah, they didn't like that at all. But they didn't know how to cancel an account. They just didn't know. So that was a wonderful experience. I had a great time with that. But I know that we maxed out on at different times on the Robin stunt. And it was a stunt.
Hmm.
And therefore, there could have been 100,000 people trying to kill the little bastard forever and ever, or another 100,000 people who wanted him to live long and prosper. We don't know. It doesn't matter because whether he was killed at that time or he wasn't killed at that time, he would have been and was brought back subsequently. That's how DC and Marvel both roll. That's
It
how
took a
the
long time though.
excuse me. Yes, it would not take that long today.
Right.
I believe. I mean, I can't prove that. You
Well,
know.
Damien died and was back already. Like it's
There you
Damien.
go. That's right. Damien, at least, is an interesting character. What makes the other Robins since Dick interesting are contrived things. Is he bisexual? Is he gay? Is he a criminal? Is he crazy? The whole list, and that's fine. But Damien by origin at least is different.
Hmm.
Should he be Robin? He may be the only person ever to have a legitimate claim on the title if that's what he wants, and I'm not sure that's what he wants.
Hmm.
Now, I don't read all the Damien stuff because I can't possibly read all the Batman stuff because I like to sleep and
Mm.
have meals and go to the bathroom and stuff like that. Occasionally, even conventions. So, maybe there's some stuff going on that I don't know about. I'm
I mean,
sure.
I think he definitely, I don't. Again, I don't. I also don't read. And to be honest with you, I was not a fan of the concept of Damien. It
Nor
was.
was I originally.
It wasn't until he was Robin with Dick as Batman that I warmed up to the character.
And I liked the relationship between him and the young Superman boy,
Yes,
John.
I like
I
that.
thought that was brilliant. That was Dan Jurgens, I think, who wrote that. And
Pete Tomasi.
was it Pete?
Pete
Okay,
Tomasi wrote most of the Super Son stuff.
okay. Oh yeah, that's true. I was kind of referring to Dan's work on John
Sure.
Kent before that. Um, but you're right. And I like that. I thought it was really interesting, and I'm really saddened by the fact that that ended. Damien did not get jolted into the future or uh, live into the future when nobody else did. It's a little confusing. Um, but there doesn't seem to be an age gap between them anymore. For a while, there was. It, it's a tricky path, and depending on who's on it and who's paying attention, and there's a lot of different people, sometimes it just gets confusing or just doesn't work, and you're spending more time playing chess than telling stories.
So yeah, I mean, okay, so that brings this conversation into something else I wanted to get into. And one of my lists over here of things that I want to talk about or write about at some point is something called Too Many X-Men, right?
Yeah,
Um, and there are too many X-Men. There's too many
yeah,
X-Men to keep track of. There are too many to tell. Now, when people do things like this and they bring them in, there's some logic to it. There's some sense to it. Um, but uh, there, so if it feels like, for example, something along these lines is that the Legion of Superheroes hit a limit. They're like, we can't manage more than 30 something, right? Or whatever it is. There's no way we can manage more than those characters. And they kind of uh and when they went to the Legionnaires format and that whole three boot stuff, that they started to lose it there as well. But the X-Men mutantdom worked for a while when you had separate teams, right?
mm-hmm.
And you could just say, okay, well, this is the New Mutants, and this is that group, and that grew to about 15 or so. You had your X-Men that was in the, people coming and going around 20s, and then then uh, you had this explosion in the early 2000s, late 90s, I guess late 90s, early 2000s, when it was just there were millions of them.
Yeah, yes, and yes, all over the place. But at least they had different names. They weren't all called X-Men,
True.
and they had different powers. They have different powers. They are a separate universe, as far as I'm concerned.
All right.
They are single-handedly responsible for overpopulating the Marvel universe.
Yes. But so let's come back to let's bring it back to your point, because you made a good point that I strayed from the premise, and that being Green Lanterns.
Yes.
Too many Green Lanterns?
Well, too many stories about too many Green Lanterns. I accept the fact that there are all of these, or were, or will be again. I don't know where they are this week, but as created, as the Silver Age Green Lantern was created and rapidly evolved, there were a lot of Green Lanterns.
Mm-hmm.
We only cared about one of them.
Mm-hmm. Now we have 5 of
The,
them.
the others were supporting characters, and they were interesting. They were very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Some others weren't. Now, as you pointed out, and I appreciate that you counted. I thought there was more than five, but I only have five
There,
fingers, so
there might be more than five.
there. Yeah, who knows? Who knows? And they're all covering Earth. Well, I think going on in the story right now, they have this thing saying, well, the rest of the universe thinks Earth sucks and probably needs all those Green Lanterns, but they should leave the rest of us alone. I get that. If you have so many Green Lanterns covering one Earth and you have the great, vast universe full of just a few thousand other Green Lanterns, then Earth must be hell on Earth. And I'm not that dystopian. I'm pretty dystopian. So if you're exceeding my limits of dystopia, you got a problem.
Well, all right. So the concept of there being multiple Green Lanterns is fine because that was the original thing. That was the original premise that there were,
and they looked very
thousands.
different. They had different costumes and stuff. You know, they just get in our way too much. I don't mind the number. I want to hear.
But you want,
I want to read about a Green Lantern who's tasked with Earth and maybe a different one who's tasked with the Justice League. I don't know. That kind of makes sense, almost, maybe.
So let me bring this to your attention. When was Len writing Green Lantern when Joe was drawing it when everybody came to Earth?
Oh wow, I think so.
It was Len.
I think so. I don't think it was Dave.
No, Len was writing it.
No, I meant Dave Gibbons drawing it.
No,
which was really sweet.
When all of a sudden the Oa was no longer, and all the Green Lanterns were on Earth, right? And now John is an official is a regular everyday Green Lantern, and Hal's a regular everyday Green Lantern, and Guy's an everyday Green Lantern. They're not just, backups.
Right. And they're not juniors.
Right. No.
They're adults, kind of.
I question Guy.
Yeah. That's why I said kind of. Although Nathan Fillion, fine.
Yeah, that will be fine. So here's the thing. There's this concept of moving on in comics. And did you ever get to the point where you were working in comics and making comics that you felt the need to do that, to remove the character from his role or her role and replace them with a different person in that role?
I don't recall. I don't think so, but I'm not opposed to it. I like the Blue Beetle evolution, for example. I can question who really owns Blue Beetle, but that's a totally different subject.
Well, here's the question. Here's the issue with the Blue Beetle evolution and what they've done with it is that for the most part, there's really only one Blue Beetle at a time.
Right. Yes. Right. Very true.
I don't know how Ted is back alive. But he's not around very often. Another example of a character who changed roles or changed owners of the role is like the Question, right? For example, I wouldn't want two Questions running around.
Yes, that would be confusing.
Well, it would be definitely. I'd have questions.
Yes. I don't mind the evolution.
No,
I think the evolution is fine.
Just leave Vic dead, though.
And also, I don't really mind. I'm a huge Justice Society fan because, I'm a real old man, and when comics fandom really got off the ground, when we separated from science fiction fandom, Justice Society was one of the books that youngsters like me collected or really wanted to collect. That was like
So
it.
you would go back and find like the 40s books.
Well, no, we'd go and steal from the older fans, so we
Oh,
borrowed
that's
their comics.
okay.
Yeah, the hot stuff in the late '60s and the mid '60s were Justice Society and EC and the Spirit, thanks to Jules Pfeiffer, and Karl Barks.
Hmm.
And I'll stand behind that. Those are just four great categories of comics.
Hmm.
But I don't mind the Justice Society Next Generation. I
Okay.
don't mind Star Trek The Next Generation. I don't even mind Star Trek The Previous Generation. It's okay because it's linear.
Hmm.
We don't have a million Spocks running around in one place. We don't have a million Wildcats running around
Two.
in one place.
There are two.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
But one is
Only two.
old. But
Yeah,
one is old. One is very
yeah,
old.
yeah.
So
That's okay. He's a mentor, and he's very much a mentor.
yes,
That's a good
he always
role.
was.
Not in the '40s so much.
Well, in my since I have read him since he so I didn't read the '40s ones, but like since Roy brought him around, basically, because
Right.
my experience with the Justice Society is like 98% due to Roy Thomas.
Sure,
Um,
sure. And some people can say the same thing about Hitler. Their experience with Hitler is due to Roy Thomas. Now that might sound funny, but I wasn't alive when Hitler was,
mhm,
which was a good thing.
sure,
But irrespective of that, Hitler was this golden age villain, you know. Uh, but yes, absolutely. Wildcat was my favorite, one of my favorite golden age heroes that didn't make it to the silver age until he did. And then when he did so primarily in an issue of the Spectre that was drawn by Neil Adams. I think it may have been written by Neil, but my memory isn't so great. It was a terrific story, and he hung around. He was used in Brave and the Bold, and he became part of the DCU. Loved the character. I loved Erwin Hastings' work on it. I loved, Joe Kubert did some of his early stuff there. All kinds of great people, and some damn good writers, starting with Bill Finger. So there's your history lesson for the day.
well, so again, I understand your point about different the Robin thing. It's really Robin, right? Is there anybody else that meets that? The Supermans, Superboys, lots of Superboys.
How many supers are there? Super
A lot.
supers are there? I mean, and they all seem to show up in the last couple of years. I know that's not quite true, but it's largely true. It started with the death of Superman, the version that happened in the '90s, and with Steel and with all the others,
Sure,
and some are
but
good and some are bad and stuff. Okay, fine.
but
And I totally understand the public domain stuff, and it's not a bad way of dealing with that problem. It's just a bad way to establish unique and maintain unique characters.
there are out of that death of Superman, there really was only one super that remained, and that's still. I mean, Steel is not a super. He's a character. He's a Superman adjacent character, but he's not Superman.
Yeah, but he's still got that big red S. Well, except
So
that's not red. Okay. I don't have anything against the guy. I just wish that he wasn't a super adjacent, as you said, which I think is great. I think it's great, but you need them to be a little further back, and I think maybe that's what they're doing. I'm not reading the current series,
Superman
but
or action?
the Steel Works.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I am not reading it too, but I would. I do have it. I
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
got
see
it.
what Michael Dorn did with it, 'cause I think that's interesting, giving
Mhm.
him the opportunity. um, so there's a lot of supers. There's a lot of Batman.
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, and we're constantly bringing more Batmans. There's a lot of spiders.
Oh, ho, ho. I have not seen the second animated
I haven't seen it
Spider-Verse
yet,
thing,
and I
but
have.
I'm about to because it just came out on home video,
Mhm.
and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh,
But
sure.
this, but despite that, because I love the first one, but despite all that, Spider-Man's no big deal. I like, I love the original Spider-Man. I bought Amazing Fantasy 15 on off the racks, and read it at my grammar school. But there's a billion different people who are all more or less pretty much kind of the same Spider-Man. I think that Miles is a terrific character. But he's not unique. We've seen the Spider-Man before, and that guy is still around. So it's not Spider-Man the next generation. Nor
So,
was it created to be.
well, he was because the world that he lived in,
Right.
Spider-Man was dead.
Yes, and I can and I was fine with that. I may not have been quite so fine with the Ultimate Universe
Right.
because it just got too big too fast, and it got confusing, and it stepped on its own tail a lot, tripped over its own tail even. But initially, I thought it was terrific. Um, so that worked, but now with all of the different collusions of or conflations of universes, um, it's hard to tell which ends up. Good for these guys. I hope they live long, but show me something new. Not just their origins or the type of people, their heritage, all of which is good. We need to explore other cultures. The whole idea that the Justice League of America was called the Justice League of America offended me when I was 9, and it offends me today. Except that people don't really call it Justice League of America anymore because finally people said, "What are you talking about? This guy's from Krypton or Mars or you know." So okay,
Or
it's the Justice
Atlantis.
League or Atlantis. Yeah, yeah,
Themyscira, right? All of them.
or
Yeah.
then Adam Strange, who may or may not be part of the Justice League, may or may not be part of Earth. you
Right.
know,
Depending on Zeta.
yeah. I mean, that
Um,
could be fun. That could be great fun. But if you just have a million of the same character, no matter how broadly defined that franchise is, you just Jerry Siegel, God bless him, the last story he wrote that I thought was terrific. He wrote for
the
Archie
last story he
Comics.
wrote, or the last one you thought was terrific?
Last one I thought was terrific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wrote this story for Mighty Crusaders. I think it was number 4, which was Archie, MLJ's
I
Golden
understand.
Age characters. And it was called Too Many Heroes. And they brought in every superhero, every costumed hero they could find from the Archie line, from the MLJ line in the 1940s. And it was a great story, and he made the point. He made the point quite well. And if you redid that story word for word, but substituted the MLJ characters with X-Men, say, you'd see the point. It's like, yeah, there are too many heroes here. There are too many heroes.
I agree. Our guest is on his way in. We have he popped in and popped out, so hopefully we're gonna get him back. Just for anybody's listening, oh, he's coming. I want to bring him in. Since he's there, we're gonna bring in our guest now. We have other thing. The best part about these conversations is that, like, I have like things that topics to discuss. We never get to all of them. So we'll get some more next time.
Occupational hazard.
Yeah,
We have a lot of time over the course of time.
Yes. I hope that I have no doubt that will be the case. All right. For everybody watching, and hopefully we'll get to see this, we're going to bring in our guest, one of my favorite writers and fantastic writer. We're gonna bring in Cullen Bunn right now. Hey, Cullen, how are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. Do you know Mike?
I don't think we've met.
Cullen, Mike Cullen.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you. I like your work, and the little show that Bob just put on of your stuff made my jaw drop. I knew of every one of those titles. I've read most of them, liked everything of yours I've ever read, and that's it.
Well,
I'm not gonna go on.
It's such a small snippet. There's so many things I left out. As I was going through. I often refer to you as one of the hardest working men in comics, if not the hardest working man in comics. You are so prolific, so many amazing books. I want to start out a little nerdy. We do this at times, and I think we talked about this when we met together. You're a comic book writer, and why? What attracted you to comic books? And be specifically saying, what was the first comic book you remember reading or buying?
So, I read comics from a very early age, and I remember reading an issue of X-Men when they were still in the blue and gold uniforms. I mean, I remember laying on the floor, paging through an issue of that comic. I couldn't tell you what happened in it. I just remembered the X-Men's costume in that issue. Later on, I mean, and during that, and I would have been very young at that time. I was looking at the pictures. I wasn't reading it.
Sure.
And I lived in what I consider a beautiful era where if you went to a garage sale, you could pick up a stack of 50 comic books for $1 or $2. Right. And it was nothing for my dad, or my dad was a big yard sailor, and he'd come back from yard sales with stacks of comics for me, grocery sacks full of comics. As I got a little older, there was a guy at the flea market that would sell a grocery sack full of DC comics, or a grocery sack full of Marvel comics, or a grocery sack full of it'd be Independence, which would have been Charlton and stuff like that. And he'd sell those out of the back of a pickup truck for $5. And I'd save up my money every week and take my $5 and buy a sack of comics.
Cool.
So I was always reading comic books. I remember vividly, I mean, this was not the first comic I was reading at all, but Micronauts #7.
Nice.
My dad had an office that shared a building with a grocery store. And I walked down to the grocery store and bought it off the rack, and came back to his office. And in the back room, I read that comic maybe 100 times that afternoon. And it was that comic that I credit with making me really not just like comics, but really love comics, because it was one of the first times I could see the world building taking place on the page. I saw that the world that I was reading in those 22 pages or 20 pages or whatever it was at the time was so much bigger. And that's what drew me into really loving comics. It's what I still love about not just comics, but everything. That kind of world building always draws me in. It always it attracts me, and it keeps me hooked. And that's what that was the comic that made me want to really really do something with comics. And I, you know,
It's
go,
I
go
just
ahead.
love the fact that the two names of comics that you listed there are comics you have now written.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. And look, you know, I'm not one of those comic book guys who says, "Oh, I hate comic books," because that's you know, you know, I loved X-Men. I collected X-Men with my dad. I collected X-Men comics all my life. You know, Uncanny X-Men. My dad did not read comics, but he loved helping me collect them.
That's
And
awesome.
and we built a collection of X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. And when I got the chance to finally write Uncanny X-Men, sadly my dad had passed by that time, but I knew he would have been happy and proud of that. But I remember I was in New York and we were at the offices at a summit, and they said, "Well, maybe we don't title this one Uncanny X-Men. Maybe we title it something else." And I was like, and it was some ridiculous, you know, Incredible X-Men or something. And I was like, I'm not writing this book unless it's called Uncanny X-Men. I just no, I'm writing Uncanny X-Men. And remarkably, they went along with that. So,
Thankfully, I enjoyed that run. I also enjoyed your X-Men Blue run, which
well, in a lot of ways, all those books were all like an extension, because these days you don't get long runs on comics usually.
but you did.
No.
But I started with Magneto, and I wrote 21 issues of Magneto.
Mhm.
And then they said, okay, we're ending Magneto and you're going to take over Uncanny X-Men. And I just rolled Magneto into that and continued telling Magneto stories. And then when they said, okay, we're ending Uncanny X-Men and we're shifting you to X-Men Blue, I rolled Magneto into that as well, so that I could continue the Magneto story. I was trying to cheat the system. Finally, you know, if you know, there was a plan at the end of Uncanny X-Men to go on to another Magneto story, but it just didn't. My luck ran out at that point.
But you
Well,
tried, and you had a hell of a good run with Magneto
Yeah,
on
it was.
all the different titles, and by doing so, you traveled in the beauty of the Marvel universe
Yeah,
because you could do that. You could do that at DC, I guess, but it's an awkward trip because they keep on changing the path.
right.
Um, I had a similar experience to yours when I read Fantastic Four #1, the first #1, and I had just turned 11, and I read it about 100 times. Seriously, about 100 times, and I had just never seen a comic book that like that before. But when the end of issue 3 came down, and Johnny Storm quit the team. He didn't quit the book. He quit the team, and then the next month he winds up on a Bowery flop house next to the Submariner.
Oh yeah, I remember.
My life changed.
I did. Obviously, I didn't read that book when it came out, but I have a vivid memory of reading that scene, because doesn't he light his finger on fire and burn his
Mm-hmm.
beard off the Submariner? Yeah,
That's right.
that
That's
was
right.
pretty
And
crazy.
and I'm hoping to see that in the next Fantastic Four movie. But
That would be pretty awesome. I would like to see that. I'd like to see that just to see that from my youth.
yes, yes, yes.
I kind of want to follow up on this. This is, you know, obviously things go out of order. I have plans and they don't work that way, which is the beauty of this and the wonder of it. But I want to get to the story. I want to kind of get that. A lot of your work for hire stuff, for Marvel and DC, except for the X-Men run, has been darker single character books.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
But X-Men and X-Men Blue were a chance to work on team books. So you already told us kind of how that you evolved Magneto through there. And I kind of mentioned this to you before, that the end of X-Men Blue, which like about a year predated the Hickman stuff, right?
Yes.
Because because Matt took over for a while, And anyway, but the end of X-Men Blue, how much freedom did you have to end that story in any way? And how much of it was I'm asking the question.
So I've been pretty open about this, and it was the end of X-Men Blue was not a pleasant experience for me. I got a phone call that they were ending the series, and that's a call I was used to. I was used to getting the call where, hey, the series is ending. But there was something different on that call. I could tell they were ending that series, and they were essentially ending the professional career with me. I just knew it. There had been too many things that had happened up until that point. And that was all right. It was a shift in editors in chief at the time. And I think it had probably happened to several people. But the thing that was really unpleasant about it is I was told, because we're gonna wrap the X. I had always had a big plan to send. The X-Men Blue team were these time lost characters. They were from another time, pulled into our universe, and I had a big plan to send them home. And that was what was going to happen at the end of X-Men Blue. And I was told, you're not going to write that story. We have someone else who's already writing it, and the X-Men cannot appear in your last 4 issues.
Oh,
I said,
the five.
Those 5. And I said, well, when I started this series, we made a promise to my readers, as far as I'm concerned. I promised them that this is a series about the original 5. And to end it without that is kind of stupid. And that's why you'll see it. So in a lot of ways, I had no freedom, but then in another way, I had a lot of freedom, because you see it at the end, it takes this weird shift where I start seeing what would happen in the future if they stay in our universe. Because, well, you can't stop me now. I can just, and I start saying, well, all right, we're going to go home, but Magneto goes bad, full on bad again. Because I originally said, well, then let's just end the series 4 issues early. I mean, it's dumb to put out an X-Men book without the X-Men in it. And the answer to that is, well, we need a book on the shelves. So it was going to happen. And I went back and I really put my head down and tried to figure out a way I could tell that story and still have I could still have the 5 X-Men in there and not get in the way of whatever whoever was writing that X-Men miniseries was. But I wasn't gonna, I was like, if I'm not gonna tell if I'm not gonna use the X-Men, the original 5 X-Men in this story, that's it was a dumb editorial decision. And
it's also not the book.
Yeah, right. It wasn't.
It's not the book you were writing.
Yeah,
and it's not the book that the reader who sees the logo and says, "Oh boy, I want this for this experience." They ain't gonna get it, and you're betraying the reader.
And I just don't feel like when I sit down to write a book, and I'm not always successful at this, but when I sit down to write a book, I have a vision for that. And I don't take these books because it's a paycheck for me. That's not why I wrote X-Men. I just, like I just said earlier, I wrote X-Men because I had a deep and abiding love for those characters. And yeah, I wanted at the end of X-Men Blue for it to turn into a Brotherhood of Evil Mutants book with Magneto, but there was already a plan. I mean, we knew Hickman was coming. We'd known for years that Hickman was coming, and we knew there was only so much time before we shifted. But what what was weird was that weird shift where I think all the X-Men die in the series. And I'll be honest, and it's nothing against Matt, because Matt's a great writer. Nothing against the people who are writing X-Men now. I haven't picked up an X-Men book since. I have no interest in reading it because I don't like the idea of what's going to. One of my big failings is I take ownership for these characters. I love them, and I write them like, now these are my characters. And I know that's not true, but I can't help but feeling that way.
So you're not alone. Howard Mackey once told me he never reads a book that he's written on. He never reads a character. Like he doesn't read Spider-Man. He doesn't read Ghost Rider.
Julie Schwartz told me something, gave me some advice once. He said that he never read a book after he finished editing it. He'd let that next editor run with it because it would, if he read it, he'd keep on thinking like, this is how I would do it. I wouldn't do it that way. And what, and he's right.
Yes.
It was very, very good advice. And then he complimented me on my run on the Flash. And I said, well, I thought you didn't read them after you did them. And he says, no. Carrie Bates edited it after me. I didn't read Carrie's. I read yours.
Oh, he just the subsequent one. Okay, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, it's time for me to get back in the X-Men then. I don't know.
You get complimented by Julie Schwartz. That's it. That's your day.
I don't know about that. I don't. You missed our earlier conversation where we were talking about too many X-Men, but and I have to. We're gonna leave the X-Men because I want to get into some other things, but I do want to compliment you publicly. And I don't know. Again, I don't know if this was editorial or not, but fixing Havoc is one of the things I will always be thankful for you.
That and I will say that those things did not come from editorial.
Really,
within the confines of the series, up until the end, I was doing whatever I wanted to. And that was fun. The only thing that was like derailed it was that ending where they already had a plan to send them back, and I didn't like that because I had a plan to send them back, and I thought that had always been up until just a few months earlier the plan for the series. And I don't like that.
All right. Well, thank you for fixing Alex. All right. What it's interesting because in preparing for this, I went on your website and it says Horror Master or something like that on your website, which probably needs to be updated.
I'm not cocky at all, right?
Right. Well, it's funny because my point is, I don't think of you as a horror writer. You do write horror very well. What appeals to you about that genre? Because you do write it very well.
Yeah. So I've written a lot of other stuff.
You have.
I mean, and probably the other stuff outweighs the horror stuff. But at some point, I decided I have to stake a claim of what kind of writer I am.
Okay.
And I've written so much horror stuff at this point, or stuff that's horror adjacent. Magneto, for instance, was a horror series in my mind. It was it was a serial killer type story in a lot of ways. I feel like it's a genre where I can do a lot of different things. I can tell a lot of different kinds of stories. There's something cathartic about writing it for me. I write these awful, awful things, and it's a way of me dealing with, on a personal level, it's a way of me dealing with all the things that scare me every day, the things that I'm always stressing about and worry about. I use horror fiction to kind of exercise those things. And I hope that in the same way, readers then pick it up and maybe it helps them cope with, even though it's dark and there's terrible things happening. I've always thought horror is sort of a genre of hope because I read these stories or watch a movie or whatever, and these characters are struggling against these terrifying circumstances, but they're fighting for their lives. They're not giving up. And oftentimes it doesn't work out in their favor and something ghastly happens. But the fact that they're fighting, it kind of fills me with a little bit of hope. I like to see characters facing terrible odds and not just giving up. Because then I'm like, oh, my car broke down. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I say, oh, wait, it could be a serial killer stalking me through summer camp.
Or Galactus is about to eat your planet.
Well, yeah, sure. In a lot of ways,
it's a horror story.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it's just it's a genre I'm comfortable in. I'm always going to do other kinds of things, but I put that stake out there, master of horror comics, just to it's in a way, it's a little bit of internet marketing, trying to get people.
It's branding.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean, it's a good brand. I mean, like I said, you do it real well. And again, there's something you said about it, is that a lot of your books that many people would consider horror stories, there's something about them that is, even the last book you ever read is, that's a horror book, but there's something endearing and captivating about it in a positive way. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there's a lot of different, flavors. I mean, there's different subgenres. There's, and I just, it's actually, this is, it's what I'm a fan of. It's what I love more than anything. So why not write that as well?
Okay.
Horror is a legitimate emotion that all of us suffer from with, and therefore it is critical fodder for storytelling.
Yeah.
It is the underpinning of most all stories. So developing horror as a genre is just taking something that's always been there and putting a little bit more light on it.
Yeah.
Or putting a little more character into it.
For sure. And look, editors at Marvel and DC would happily tell you that every time they say, hey, would you be interested in writing this character? I'm like, can I do a horror take on that character? Can I do a horror take on that character? That's my first, it's always been my first question. The first thing I officially pitched to Marvel was a book called The Macabre Moon Knight. And it was an ongoing Moon Knight series of horror stories. I pitched a reboot of Web of Spider-Man that was all horror stories. I was always pitching horrific versions of the characters.
I can hardly wait for your modeling with Millie. I'll be right there.
He's taking notes.
I think I've got one. Now that you said it, I think I could pitch a good, scary modeling with Millie story.
Why not? I mean, actually, it could work.
For sure.
There's no reason why it couldn't work.
Right.
And you got the chops to pull it off. The question is, does Marvel have the guts?
Are you telling me the modeling industry is not full of terrible, terrible events?
Terrible people.
Absolutely. Oh my God. You're going to have a great time with that.
So I kind of want to talk about story and how it develops. We've talked about this as well, but like, how does a story develop for you from idea to complete plot? Like how much of a story is finished when you become aware of it?
So I keep a lot of notebooks. I'm always jotting down ideas, and those ideas sometimes never turn into anything. Sometimes I wrote one down today. I took a picture of a sign I saw today on the side of the road. Nobody steal this from me, listeners. But it said, the sign was like, it said lab puppies, and it had a phone number. And I was like, lab puppies. And I get it. They're talking about Labrador puppies. But I was like, wait a minute. These are puppies from a lab. And they're just pawning them off on people. And I took a picture and I was like, what kind of mutant puppies are being, tossed out there?
And there's a whole story in 2 words.
And I took a picture of it. It files in my digital notebook. I have handwritten notebooks. Maybe in 5 years, I'll pick that up and I'll do something with it. And a lot of times it's just a sentence. Sometimes it's an idea for a character. Sometimes it's a world or a situation. Sometimes it's just nonsense. And I latch on to one of those. I'll flip through my notebooks from time to time if I'm really trying to come up with an idea. And I'll latch on to one of those and I just start writing. It's just a mess. I just write it and write it and write it. And then eventually a story surfaces. If it's worth its salt, a story will surface as I'm doing that free writing. And that's how almost every book I work on happens. I mean, sometimes an artist calls me and says, hey, I really want to do a book about Dracula. I'm like, okay. And I'll dig through my notebooks and see if I have any Dracula notes, and I'll start free writing, and I'll just come up with something. But I don't know where, I don't necessarily know when that's going to hit me or when, The Sixth Gun, for instance, was an idea I had for a story element in The Damned, and it didn't work in The Damned. So I took it, and I had that in my notebook, and eventually I started trying to flesh it out as its own thing. So it's just it starts with me. Look, it can start with anything. A cool title, a little bit of something, and then I just kind of start building it out if I can.
All right. How about Dark Ark?
Dark Ark started as a joke.
This is what I want. See, I had no idea. For the viewers, I had no idea where this was going to go, but that does not surprise me, and I want to hear it.
I used to have a fun game that I would play with my frequent collaborator, Brian Hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell him what I thought he would think is the dumbest idea possible, and just try to infuriate him with these ideas. And a few books that have come out started as those ideas that infuriated Brian. Dark Ark didn't infuriate him, but I remember being at a convention, and I was just sitting at the table, and I'm like, what can I get Brian with now? What can I tell him that he's really going to hate? And I was like, what if Noah's Ark was just full of the bad monsters and just full of the bad creatures? And what if there's a pair of unicorns who should have been on Noah's Ark, but they got put on the bad ark?
Oh my gosh.
And it was just, that's it. That is what Dark Ark was. And when Aftershock asked me to pitch some books to them, I sent them a packet of maybe 20 ideas. I was like, let me just show you all these ideas. And Dark Ark was was in that list, but it was never the one I thought they would take. And that was the first one they gravitated to. They're like, we really want to do this Dark Ark. And I was like, oh, well, great. Now I actually have to take it seriously.
Now I have to deliver.
Now I have to figure out how to tell that story. So yeah, Dark Ark started, it was just a joke. And it wasn't it wasn't necessarily intended to be a comic. It was something I toyed around with in my head more to entertain myself than anything,
Mm-hmm.
Another book I did, The Tooth, which I did with Matt Kent, that started as an idea. I told Brian Hurt that idea on the drive to a convention, and he said, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I was like, well, it's happening now. There's, nothing will stop me from getting that book out. So
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Sometimes upsetting people is the best thing you can do for a story. When you remember Superman versus Muhammad Ali, when that came out, I was watching the reaction at conventions to reader at a convention because it had just come out. And that full page shot of Superman lying there, all beaten up, really affected people horribly. I mean, they had a hard time because you don't see Superman like that.
Right.
And certainly not so big and so well drawn. So I told Neil Adams that story, like the minute I got back from the convention. And Neil had a huge smile on his face. And Neil says that's exactly the right response.
Yeah.
And yes, he's right. And by the way, there's a million years worth of storytelling in that one response.
Sure.
Yeah. That's a good thing. You gotta shake people up. Otherwise, you're just giving them the same old thing. And we don't need more of the same old thing. We got plenty of the same old thing.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to kind of flow on this a little bit. So you said that sometimes, an artist will come to you with an idea about something they want to do. Is there things that you bring particularly to an artist? We talked about the last book on Earth when you had met Layla and you were talking to her, and that you said that might be something you want to bring to her. How does that work out for you?
It's different for every project.
Sure.
With that one, when I met her at a convention, she said, I really want to do a horror book and I want to do something weird. And I said, okay, well, I'll keep something in mind. I'll get back to you. I'll come to you with some ideas. And one of the books I had been pitching for a while was the book that would eventually become the last book you'll ever read. It originally was just about this sort of de-evolution into this vicious state that was happening, sort of a disease type story. And that was never the right way to do it. That's why the book didn't happen until it did. But as I was looking through, things like, what can I toy with that would be good for Layla to draw? I stumbled back on that idea and I said, well, okay, what if we shifted a little bit? And I shifted to this writer, and we really play up the sexiness of the story, and we play up the, we make it a little less about this savagery, this viciousness that's going on, and more about this woman's sort of own hubris in a lot of ways. And something about that just it felt right for her to draw that. So
Sure.
based on other things she's drawn, and I sent it to her as a, and just said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And it, the publisher was really into it. They really liked the idea of her drawing something, and the rest is history. Other times it's I do think about what would look cool if Brian Hurt was drawing it. What would look cool if Matt Kent was drawing something? What would look really cool? And I just so I keep that in mind. But other times artists come to me and say, hey, I really want to do a story about this, or I have an idea. The Damned really started with Brian Hurt saying he had this sort of idea for this mobster dude that was all scarred up, and he had a character design he liked. He had a title he liked called The Demons, but he didn't know what happened. Beyond that, that was it. And the Demons became The Damned, and Eddie, the main character of The Damned, was that character Brian showed me a sketch of.
That's awesome. That's great.
Everything starts somewhere.
Yeah.
Sometimes casting against type, which is a highfalutin way of saying, this is not a person you normally associate with this type of material. Sometimes that's the best way to go. You want to get something new out of them, get something new into the marketplace, a twist on a theme that has been overdone. Go against type with a person who's good enough to pull it off, and be prepared to eat the first issue and start over.
How does your collaborative process change with artists? I mean, you've worked with some artists for a really long time, but you have some very. Luckily, for most of your creator-owned stuff, you've kept the artist on the book. For most of it, you're not changing artists. How does that process change for you?
Yeah. So I get asked that a lot. And I do not write differently for any artist.
Okay. That's a fair answer. Absolutely.
My scripts, the template of my script changes every issue, because I've got this obsession that I'm going to find the perfect format. At some point, I'll find the perfect script format. And for years, I've tried to, decipher that. But my scripts look the same for a script for someone like Brian Hurt, who I've worked with since the very beginning. The format's essentially the same for someone that I'm just working with for the first time. And with Brian in particular, we were just talking about, he wouldn't accept anything less. He wants the full script. He doesn't want me to shortcut it for him. Do I think he could draw it? Absolutely. He could draw from my outline, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants the full script experience. The story deserves the full script experience. And that's what I give. I've had a few instances where the artists have said, can we do it, old Marvel style? Right. And if that's, and I'm talking 3 or 4 issues in my career, the artist has asked for Marvel style. And if that's what they really wanted, then okay, I'll do it. I can't stand it. And not because I don't like, I think it's so much more work for me doing it in that format.
Interesting.
I don't like writing dialogue after the I don't like writing dialogue after the fact because it takes me forever. And it's not just with the art. Like a lot of times I'll write a script and I just say, you know what, this is going to go real fast. I'm going to write all the action scenes and then I'm going to go back and put all the dialogue in. And I really wish I had I'd pay someone to stand right here next to me. And every time I say that to myself, just to punch me right in the head, because it's always terrible for me. It always takes forever. When if I just sit down and write the dialogue, yes, it takes a little bit to get to the end of a little bit longer to get to the end of the script. But if I just did it, it'd be better. And I mean, and I do like a full lettering pass after art's done anyway. I always look at it, but
how much do you change?
Not a lot.
Okay.
Not a lot. I mean, my scripts are pretty tight. I mean, Brian, I just did a lettering pass for something Brian's working on, and Brian's great about, okay, you scripted a 5-panel page here. I did 10. So we need to, he's one of those guys who's always going to add more panels. I know he is. So, I mean, maybe it's not about how I change my scripting process, but it is how I think about, okay, I know when Brian gets to this page, he's going to add 3 to 10 panels because that's the madman he is.
Right.
Usually it's more about moving things around. If a panel doesn't fit, doesn't fit the dialogue, or if an artist draws more panels or not enough, or the artist draws the wrong thing. I can tell this story because Matt Kent is very proud of it.
Okay.
When we did the Tooth, I had a scene where a group of dogs chase our heroes. And I got the pages back in, and Matt called me and said, hey, just so you know, I don't like drawing dogs. So I drew vampires. So there's 1 or 2 panels of dogs, and then the dogs turn into vampires. So, yeah, I had to do a little bit of rewriting there and stuff. But,
at least you didn't make them horses.
Right. I didn't. Yeah, we didn't. He would have drawn vampires anyway. He would just.
Horses are much harder to draw.
Yes.
Right.
Much harder to draw. That what we call the Marvel method, the plot first method, which was not created by Stan or by Marvel. It was used at Fiction House in the 1940s, and the writers managed to overwrite like sons of bitches with that process. But the artwork was beautiful. That Marvel style was done for guys like Jack Kirby, who are going to give you 80% of the story anyway. Yeah. You have this idea, it comes up, it's a couple of paragraphs, maybe it's a couple of pages, and then the artist goes and runs with it. And, you want to work with Jack Kirby, that's probably the way it's going to work.
For sure.
And chances are pretty good that you're going to do that, just for the experience. The fact that you have the same approach to full script writing for every artist is very interesting to me. I don't know how you can help but not think of the visuals that artist can provide. And Ostrander and Truman and I would spend weeks just plotting an issue of Grimjack, having a swell time. I mean, really, our notes should have been published instead of the book. That's how much fun it was.
Sure.
And then, as John constantly said, Timothy would just go off and draw what he wanted anyway. And it worked. I mean, it sort of paid attention to the plot and to where we were going and used the right characters. But the amount of trust that's involved in that is astonishing.
Well,
it's just another way of working.
Yeah, and let's keep it, to put all things on the table. every script I write, the first page reads with a little paragraph that says, listen, this is how I wrote this.
Right.
However, you're the artist. You're going to think visually a lot better than I do. So please don't think of these as marching orders. That kind. It's got a message that I'm like, this is a collaboration. This is it's a partnership, and I'm a writer, and yes, I've got in my mind what a page might look like, and it's almost always wrong. It's all it's never going to look like I have it in mind. But that's one of the things I like about it. One of the things I like about in comics.
It's just our medium is a sequentially collaborative medium.
Yes.
And that makes it unique. I can't think of any other medium that is totally dedicated to the concept of you do what you do, the next person picks up the ball. It's sort of it's like running a marathon. It's like running a rally, and obviously I love this medium, so I think that's cool. It's like, wow, what are we going to get out of this? Everything is a jack in the box. That's great.
Yeah, well, what I love about it is, for me, what comics satisfies for me is it's almost an immediate gratification, because a script gets turned in, and in short order, I'm seeing thumbnails, and I'm seeing pencils, and I'm seeing something that shows me there's something happening, and I need that for my own sanity. I need to see things are coming together and happening.
Yeah, I get that. Absolutely.
All right, so opposite to that, or different from that, I kind of wanted to bring this up. What was the process of seeing, or how much did you see of the translation of The Empty Man to film?
I saw a lot of it. Was
it a lot of time between that kind of stuff? Did you get sort of?
I had very little input on The Empty Man. I did see the scripts early on. I saw every version of the script. I saw 6 different versions of the movie. So I've seen, I saw it, from
through the editing process.
Yeah, through the editing process. I saw a lot of The Empty Man.
It's on like FXX on Friday, just in case anybody wants to watch it.
Yeah, I think that's.
You should watch it, because I think then Cullen gets money for it. So that's definitely watch it.
I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. It's it was an interesting process. I didn't have a ton of input on it. The director didn't. I don't think the director wanted anyone to have a lot of input on it.
Okay.
And that's fine. And sure. At the end of the day, I think it was a pretty great movie. Cool. I don't know, great adaptation. I think it's a great movie.
Okay.
And that's great. I'm happy that it's out there. I'm happy my name's on it. I'm happy it has some elements from the comic. It's its own thing.
Sure.
Since then I've had a little more input on most of the adaptation stuff that's been going on.
Good. I love that book. I love Vanessa. She's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love the book, and I would have liked to have seen some of those characters in the movie. I like La Sombra in the movie, though. I think he's a cool character. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see different takes.
So I want to talk about. Oh, let me get to this. So while we've been talking, Philip Johnson texted me and wanted me to let you know, hey, and
I hate you.
He said that you sent him a copy of Ghoul Next Door, and his son loved it, and he was very excited about it. So I wanted to pass that along.
That's just been a few months ago, but yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad that his kid liked it. That was awesome.
So what's up with that story? Like, how did that one change or come for you?
Ghoul Next Door is something I had always wanted to do. I like the idea of doing horror stories for kids.
Sure.
A few years back, I wrote a middle reader novel that was a horror story. And I just like that. I like that feel. I like that playground, because kids love it. Kids like to be scared. But so do adults. Adults can read that kind of stuff and get a kick out of it,
How do you juggle that? Like, because you have built your career scaring the crap and offending and jostling adults. How do you dial that back and still maintain the authenticity
Well,
of
to
it?
some degree, I don't dial back the scares.
Okay.
I mean, The Ghoul Next Door it's about a boy who makes friends with a ghoul. And at the heart of these ghouls, they eat the dead, and that's never, they are the eaters of the dead that live under cemeteries. But what I did, look, obviously I'm not going to do anything offensive in that book. I'm not going to have these characters telling dirty jokes or doing horrible things. But I don't dial back the horror elements, but I play up the sense of fun.
Okay.
So I want these stories to be I want them to be a little scary. I want them to feel like, maybe I shouldn't read this. Maybe this might be too scary for me. And so The Ghoul Next Door has some scares, but at its heart, it's got a lot of fun in it. And then the sequel to Ghoul Next Door, I think it's a little scarier. And then when I was writing that one, I was like, oh man, is this one going to be too scary for kids? And I was like, nah, they'll like it. They'll like this. So I don't try to cheap out or dumb down the scares. I don't think that's what any reader wants. And I want to hook these kids into reading as they get older. I want them to still be reading my comics.
There you go. That's
right. Absolutely.
Get them while they're young.
Yeah,
See, the thing is about kids, unlike adults, by and large, they will bring stuff to the table. They'll bring some of their own stuff to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And you have no way of anticipating what that is. It could be great fun, but if you have 100 different kids reading your story, you've really written 100 different stories. That's so cool.
Yeah, and I think about when I was a kid. Look, I was reading all those great Charlton anthology books. Those books had some terrifying stories in them for kids. And they didn't, it wasn't, obviously, I guess, all comics were for kids back then. So they had some terrifying comics, in there. And as a kid, I loved being scared by those books. And I kind of channel a little bit of that too. How I felt reading those stories back then.
Sure. Which writers inspired you the most as you were growing up, and whose attitudes you kind of put into your work, or at least influenced your work?
It's hard for me not to say Bill Mantlo, only because I feel like he, just what I was talking about with Micronauts earlier, he was such a huge world builder.
Yeah.
He took Micronauts, which was a toy line without a story, and he developed this massive universe that still influences the Marvel universe to this day.
Right.
There's still elements of that show up. And he did the same thing with Rom. So Bill Mantlo, it's hard for me not to say he's the most influential.
It's interesting because there's a lot of horror in what he wrote too.
Yeah, there was. And then Claremont, I got to tell you, those big story arcs that he would tell in X-Men, you couldn't get away with it today. And it kind of saddens me that you couldn't get away with it today. Because he would tell stories, and this again is the kind of thing that always it hooked me and got me. Is he'd drop there'd be a character who'd show up in one panel in issue 123 or whatever, and that's a super important character, but he's not going to pay it off for about 20 issues, and then suddenly the character comes back in.
I agree with you.
publishers don't have the time, don't do it. Readers don't have the patience for it. I remember reading the issue of Uncanny X-Men that Storm loses her powers, and the audible gasp. Like, and it was years before that pays off.
Sure.
Readers today would not go for it. You pay it, you fix it. You fix it right now.
Yeah, you're right. And that's because we're so used to overcrowding the reader. You can't pull that much more out of their attention span.
Yeah.
They're only human.
I don't know. I don't know about blaming it on the reader. I'm
not blaming.
I think writers live in a different world. I think one of the greatest slow burn arcs in comics history is the Judas Contract, because it takes 40 issues.
Yeah.
40 issues, because issue 1 starts, well, the Trigon thing actually even goes longer, but because that's issue 1 and that goes into the backstory issues. But like issue 2 is the first appearance of Deathstroke, and it goes and everything that happens along that time, while there's tons of adventures and things going on, you get a panel here, a panel this way, that, oh, he's still around. Don't forget, I'm going to get to this.
Yeah.
I think that the length of time that somebody has on a book is difficult. Like, writers you got 6 issues to write a story, and you better, if you do well, maybe we'll give you more.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. I'm with Mike. I'm not blaming readers. I just don't think we have the patience for those kind of stories anymore. I wish we did. I will always have patience for it, but
we also have the trade paperback concern. So you're sort of subtly pushed maybe into writing 5-6 issue stories, because that makes for a nice trade paperback, and the publisher needs that money from the trade paperback as well as from the pamphlet sales. So
for sure,
I think that's limited us in some ways, but it's expanded the market in others. We're reaching different readers. So it's a trade.
But I was listening just this morning. I had a long drive today, and I was listening to an audiobook about, off topic a little bit, about Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And it was talking to people who have played Dungeons and Dragons forever, like I have, and how the way Dungeons and Dragons was played when I first started playing is very, very different from the way Dungeons and Dragons is played now. And that's because the players have different. Some players have grown old and fallen out of the hobby, and some players are new. Some players have been playing the game for just a few years, but their life experiences and the things that they get out of the game are just drastically different from what they were when I started playing the game. And the best enjoyment is to accept that and embrace it and move along with it.
Right.
And that's, so it's fine for me that things have changed, but I'm a little sad that I don't get those long Storm lost her powers arcs.
Well, it's funny also because what Mike said is true about the trade paperbacks and stuff like that. But if there was a writer who I would say defies that, it would be you. For example, when I read Basilisk, I was expecting, as anything from Boom, it's like 5 issues and we'll see what we get, right? And it didn't. Like, at the end of the 5th issue, I was like, okay, well, this isn't over yet. We have more, and the same thing with, even the last book on Earth. I mean, the last book you'll ever read. Like, I'm like, oh, well, he's gonna end it now, because that's what's gonna happen. And you've gotten some length in some of the things you've done recently. I mean, you have experience doing that.
Yeah. And in Basilisk and Bone Parish and Ghost Lore from Boom, going into those projects, I have 12 issues. Okay. I know that they have an appetite. We're telling a 12-issue story. So that's what I'm plotting for, and that's what I'm building. And I love the 12-issue series. I love it. I think it's you know, would I love an even longer series? Sure, for the right story. But Bone Parish and Basilisk and Ghost Lore, they're made for 12 issues. That's they're built for. Not going to answer all your questions. I'm not gonna. That's not the way I work. And yes, could I do another Basilisk arc? Yup. Probably not going to, but I could. Because I love those characters and I love the world, but I think it's fun for me to go out on what I consider a high point, and it's all right to want to return to it and never get a chance to for something like that.
Every once in a long while, a creator will come back to something years and years later.
Yeah.
And it will either be amazing or a mistake.
Right.
Well,
it's one or the other. There's nothing in between.
So what was the thing that just happened with Sixth Gun?
Well, it's just what Mike just described.
I'm just saying.
The Sixth Gun, was a 50-issue series and several spin-off series. And then we did a book called Shadow Roads, which was sort of which was a sequel to the Sixth Gun that ran 10 or 12 issues. But Brian Hurt and I are going to return. But the thing was, Shadow Road was a sequel to Sixth Gun, but it wasn't. It kind of existed in sort of a limbo state outside of the Sixth Gun. But next, or in 2025, we're going to return to the Sixth Gun. We have a new big series planned for the Sixth Gun, and we didn't want to do it. We have talked about this. There's never been a conversation between Brian and myself where we didn't talk about the Sixth Gun, but we've always said we're not going to do this unless it's the right, it's the right story. It's going to, we're not going to do anything that cheapens what the Sixth Gun was.
Okay.
So we are coming back to the Sixth Gun and Shadow Roads, and we're merging those stories into something that I think will make, which will actually enhance everything we've done before without taking away from anything people have already read. So yeah, and believe you me, it terrifies me, but it's also. But it also is the most fun I've had doing comics in at least 3 or 4 years. It's just super fun talking about it with Brian and, coming up with ideas and how we might approach this thing again. And it's just been, it's been a blast. And so I hope, Mike, it is one of those scenarios where it's wonderful and not one of those scenarios where it's a complete faceplant.
The beautiful thing about all this is when you approach a project like that, you are defying the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And it. At some point, you figure that out because what you're giving not only the reader, but yourself and the artist an experience where you have your cake and eat it too.
Oh, yeah. And we absolutely ended the Sixth Gun on a very final note. And so there's, it's going to be really cool to bring it back. What we finally figured out is this great mechanism that is going to allow us to do some really cool new stories.
So,
and that's it. That's what you need. If you find that little flame, you're off and running.
And this was there was a Kickstarter or something like that. I missed it. I know that, and we got
the
a little bit late.
The Kickstarter was for a new edition of the series. It's these omnibus these library editions of the series that we're doing. So those are going to come out anyway, and we are doing some new stories connected to that as part of the Kickstarter. There's a few like prequel stories, not prequels to the original series, prequel to the thing that's coming next. That'll come out as part of that. That was the Kickstarter that just wrapped up.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. So I want to talk about one other thing, or we can talk about however you want to talk about. Your newsletter that's not a Substack, right? It's just your newsletter.
It's on
right?
Substack. It is on Substack. It's free to read, but it is on Substack.
Okay. I am a subscriber. I enjoy it. How is that experience for you to write that? And to be honest with you, you're one of the most diligent people out there writing uh, a newsletter. What is that experience like for you, and what is the feedback you get from that?
Um, so the newsletter is real important to me for a number of reasons. First of all, just on a completely marketing level, I think social media is dying. I don't think Facebook and Twitter are going to. They're not for me anymore, and it's sad because I loved Twitter, loved it, and I don't even think about it some days. I'm just like, man, whatever. Oh, I didn't look at Twitter today.
Right.
And I, and I'm not, and I don't think I have social media. I have platforms that I'm on, but I just don't know that I have the energy to put into it for such a low yield. The newsletter, on the other hand, I love writing, and I don't feel like if I miss an issue, which I don't miss many, or if I'm a day or two late, I start feeling like, oh no, what have I done? I'm letting everyone down. I'm letting myself down. So I there's something about it. I like that level of communication. I feel like people enjoy it. The subscribers who read it like it. You're not going to know what you're going to get from one to the next. Sometimes it's super sad, Cullen, and I have people at conventions that are coming. Are you all right? Are you okay? Like, yeah, I'm all right. Everything's okay. Don't worry. But you're just gonna. That newsletter is I am opening the doors, and you're going to see what it's like in my life and in my head. Sometimes it's about, hey, I got new kittens this week. And sometimes it's about struggling with stories I'm writing, or struggling with dealing with publishers, or struggling with just some ideas. You're just going to get a little bit of everything. You're getting the one thing that I hope people know with me, for better or worse, you're always going to get the real me. I mean, I don't have a persona as a comic creator. And I am envious of those comic creators who have big personas. I'm envious of it, but that's not what you're going to get from me. You're going to get me talking about, I watched Godzilla this week and I really liked it. It's going to be, it's just, that's what I want. I want people to know I'm a real person. I feel like the response I get is very, it's very positive. And I think, I got this last week, I wrote a lot about Dungeons and Dragons and my experience playing. And I had, legendary comic creators sending me emails telling, well, this is my experience in Dungeons and Dragons. And it's just nice to see that kind of thing and know that people are really reading it and enjoying it. And yeah, it's just, it's my Lake Wobegon. I'm just going to I just tell stories about what's going on in my life.
That's an interesting comparison. It's a small community, but the community is shared by creators and the readers who want to be creators and the readers who do not want to be creators. That community has very little to do with business or profit. Yeah. It has a lot to do with story and art.
Yeah,
and I think where you come from, telling people where you come from, is the ultimate behind the scenes material you can provide.
Yeah, and like I said, like this last the last issue was essentially about a young comic fan coming up to me at a comic book convention this past weekend, and and she said, "You wrote all these books?" And I was like, "I did." She says, "Wow, it's really cool that you can be productive at your age."
oh.
So that's what my newsletter's about. Because it's just funny. Also, it's just funny that this. And I wrote about this in a newsletter. Comic books doesn't have to be this diabolical, sinister conspiracy among creators and publishers. It doesn't need to be. It's just everything's. Let's face it. every comic book idea, I tell my wife this all the time. Every idea I have, I don't like telling them to people because they sound stupid. Everything in comics is kind of stupid though, so it's okay.
Yeah,
It's
I
all
have
right.
that.
Every event in comics, everything that happens in comics, it's all kind of dumb. So it's okay. It's funny.
I have those conversations with my wife all the time, and she loves comics and she reads comics. But like, I start explaining to her the Summers family tree, and she's like, "That is dumb."
It's all just, it's a fun kind of dumb. It's a fun
Yeah,
dumb.
no, it is.
I like fun dumb, but also, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, all the stuff that happens at a convention, I'm not saying all of it, but a good chunk of it is all fun dumb. There's some,
Sure.
there are terrible things out there, and sometimes I write about those terrible things. But it's just it's my way of sharing with people, and that's what I want to do. I want people to feel like they're welcomed into my world and my life, and maybe I overshare. I don't know, but that's what I do.
Well, you're giving the people what they want, and you're happy to give it to them.
If they want to hear my opinions on which Micronaut is the best, I certainly do share that kind of stuff.
And that's wonderful. Because if you did that on the street, they'd lock you up.
Which Micronaut is best? That's the next one I'm writing. That's my next newsletter.
I cannot wait, to be honest. Christy knows that if I'm on the show, she just starts grabbing Micronauts to bring up to her sales show, and she's like, "Oh, this one, Bob will like this one."
Yeah.
So I kind of want to talk about, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about social media. And
okay.
I agree with you that we're definitely at a crossroads, and from multiple perspectives. One, I was looking. There's about somewhere between 100 to 200 people in our community, if you think about it. Writers, comic book people, right? Comic book people. And I like being in touch with them. I like knowing what's going on in their lives. I like that. I like the ability to communicate with people who I care about, and that's always been my favorite part about social media.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about Twitter. Twitter is useless. Twitter is useless to me because I cannot. While I enjoyed the entertainment value of it, since that's gone, the other part of it is that it was useful to a small content creator to generate traffic.
Mm-hmm.
It is no longer useful for that. I cannot generate traffic. I cannot generate traffic in any way.
Right.
And that's what I relied on. And to be honest with you, the newsletter aspect of what comes, and what that provides is where Pop Culture Squad is probably going to end up, going for our content and for our traffic generation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Everything evolves. Cities evolve. They're like human beings. They grow and they change. It's happening faster and faster. I mean, Cullen, when you were told, like, wow, for an old geezer like you do good stuff.
That's not the word. That's not the words they use. You use more hurtful words.
Jimmy said I was almost dead. So,
but for me, it's like, getting out of bed is an accomplishment. But once I do get out of bed, I'm going to try to do at least something a little different.
Yeah.
I don't want to bore myself. And if you keep that in mind with your establishing your relationship with your readers, you'll do fine.
It is scary though. I mean,
sure.
Twitter in particular was a huge marketing platform for me. That's how
sure.
I'm
and everyone
comics. Yeah. And I worry that's going away. I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers yet from the Kickstarter we just did. We tracked all that, what came from what tweet and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at any of that yet, but I feel like that's going away a little bit with algorithms and all the nonsense I don't understand, and throttling down of messaging and things like that. I don't know, what that means. Twitter. So it's social media in general is scary to me. Where it's going. Twitter is disappointing only because I worked so hard to build an audience there, and I feel like that either they're leaving or they're just not seeing what I'm posting.
I don't see. I mean, I don't see your stuff as much.
Yeah, Facebook is. I've never been a fan of Facebook, but I mean,
Facebook
I guess
is not. Facebook is a very interesting thing. We're broadcasting on it right now, so
yeah.
But it is to me, Facebook has always been a place to catch up with friends. Like it's always been just what's going on in my friend's life. I do not want marketing on my Facebook. I expect marketing in Twitter. I expect people to be sharing stuff. Right?
What we call today social media is like that life force. It will constantly evolve, probably at a rate where at a certain age people are going to go, holy crap, I can't keep up. And every generation is going to do that, but it'll constantly evolve. It'll constantly do other things. And there will be people who figure out how to take advantage of that. And there are people who use that as a platform for being incredible assholes because sadly Earth is full of too many incredible assholes.
Yeah.
Okay, you try to maneuver your way around them. I mean, there was a point when the internet really scared the poo out of me.
Wait. When was that? Because
yesterday.
Just now.
It'll continue. It'll continue to grow and to change. And growth isn't always for the better, but it's always happening. So I don't worry about that. There'll be plenty of opportunities. Somebody will invent something different and that'll change everything. And then somebody will come and screw it up, like what happened with Twitter.
Well, it's just, for me, I've always viewed all these things as a marketing device.
Yeah,
sure.
And when I came into comics after a 15-year career in marketing. And I can tell you that marketing comics is the hardest thing I don't know how to do it. I don't know what the trick is. And I feel for the marketing teams that work at publishers. I think they have a very difficult job. I feel like getting that message out there is difficult with you see the previews book. It's that thick. And
it doesn't even have Marvel and DC.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know about that, but you're right. It doesn't. That's not without Marvel and DC in it.
And, if they were in it, it would be like the Manhattan phone book.
Right.
For those of you that remember phone books, it was it's just huge.
So
it's terrifying for the store owner every time that plops on their desk. The new previews and the new order form, it's like every month they're betting the rent.
Yeah, for sure. So it's tough to figure out how to market to that.
Yeah.
And with the changing landscape of social media, I think it's going to get tougher. For me, the newsletter is a big part of how I'm addressing it. But I've got some other, along with all those story ideas I was telling you about, I got a notebook full of how do I market and how do I get people to
buy my book.
Yeah, how do I get them to buy the book?
Yeah.
There's a book in that.
Yeah.
So where are we at with Ghost Lore? It's not done yet, right?
No. Ghost Lore issue 4 comes out tomorrow.
And it's 12.
It's a 12-issue series.
Okay. What else is coming up? I mean, I read the newsletter, so I know that it's all in there.
It's all in there, but a lot of the stuff in the newsletter hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about. I'm hoping that there's a lot of stuff in there that's a lot of that working on stuff that hasn't been announced.
I put code names out there.
I love that.
I'm working on.
I love that.
You
need to make sure that you unmask the code names when they actually come out.
Oh, I think I try to remember to do it, but sometimes I forget. So Ghost Lore is, still coming out. Issue 4 comes out tomorrow. I'm looking at if I'm looking off size because I've got my bulletin board.
Yeah, no. Please do that. We want the accurate information.
Midnight Show is a new book I'm doing with Brian Hurt that starts in October from Dark Horse.
Nice.
which is I think gonna be a lot of fun, especially for October, because it's very much a popcorn horror book that, limited series you'll get. I've got Door to Door Night by Night coming out from Vault right now.
I love that book.
I think we're on issue 7 or 8.
How do you have a term with that? Is that 12 as well?
It's be a 12-issue series. 12-issue series with, there's potential with all these things. We could do more if we want to do, but 12 issues will tell the initial story, tell a full story arc of what I want to do with Door to Door Night by Night.
That's a great book.
And then beyond that, Oni just announced a new book called Invasive that I'm doing, which is a really dark book. I mean, it's a dark one. It's about some.
You're blushing.
Letting me get away with this book. What I'm doing in this book, so it's
called Invasive.
Invasive, yes.
Listen, yeah, you're blushing just thinking about how are you going to explain this. So
it's as I think, I'm like, so I'm excited about that book. It's about surgery addiction, and it's a mean little story. But yeah, I've got a ton more books that I'm working on right now. Death of the Venomverse is coming out from Marvel right now.
Right.
So if you like multiverse stuff, which I think I heard you guys talking about right before I came on. So,
well, we were
talking about multiverse.
We weren't talking about multiverse so much as talking about the issue is that Mike wrote a column. We're gonna wrap up soon, but we'll bring this topic to you. Mike wrote a column that Robin, there are too many Robins, and they're all the same, and they're useless. And we started this, and what was your major premise in besides irritating me, because I know that part of as you're writing it, you're like, Bob's not going to like this. Fine.
Yeah, but I did praise stuff that you and I like.
True.
In common, and which was a lot of stuff. We've lost the ability to leave well enough alone. Now, we haven't talked about the copyright issues and the public domain issues, and that's a whole nother thing. But we have 42,000 Robins and God knows how many Green Lanterns, and you can't count the number of Spider-Men or Batman. The word unique, most people don't understand what that word means. There's only one thing that's unique. You can't be more unique or less unique. You're either unique or you're not. And if there's 100 different versions of the same character with pretty much the same name, you ain't unique. We need more unique. That's the premise.
What's your opinion?
It's a tough premise to disagree with.
Right. Too many Venoms. You know what? You know how many Venoms are too many? One.
Oh, come on. Look, it's difficult. The problem is it can be frustrating for me. For instance, I think Miles Morales is a great character. But how many guys are called Spider-Man in 616 Marvel Universe? It gets a little weird for me, and I'm like, but then again, things are dumb. Comics are dumb. I do like the Green Lantern. I like all the Green Lanterns because they're they're a police force out there in space. They're all Green Lanterns. I like that.
It's like you heard the top of this show.
Right. He definitely wasn't, but we did talk about that.
Yeah, I hit those points.
I just thought about
it. It's tough. I would love it if Miles could be Spider-Man. But then who's Peter? But that means you take Peter Parker off the board, and nobody's willing to do that. So then I'm like, okay, so is Miles the new Scarlet Spider, or whatever? But no, he's a great Spider-Man. That's the problem is someone created a great Spider-Man at a time when there's already a great Spider-Man. So we want both our Spider-Men. Yes.
I agree with you 100%.
So I
about Miles and about the overarching concept of too much.
Yeah, I think multiverse is a different thing. To me, I have multiverse fatigue. I get it.
The first time I met Marv, we went out to dinner and we were talking, and my friend and I were talking, and we were talking about the most recent DC reboot or something like that. And Marv's like, "Oh, are they still doing that? I'm sorry."
Yeah, I blame Marv for all of this. Actually, I blame DC because by the time Crisis, which was great, was done, they had invalidated it by rebooting Superman and Wonder Woman. And you can't create a unified universe and then change two of your three major characters. Say, oh no, that didn't happen. Well, screw you.
So I don't know. Are there too many? I mean, I don't like multiple characters in the same.
Well, there's how many Wolverines are there?
There's
4.
Hey, there's still one running around from X-Men Blue. As far as I'm concerned, he's still out there in the main Marvel universe.
Which one is the Old Man Logan?
No, it's Jimmy Hudson.
Oh, Jimmy, yeah. There you go. Okay, so there's like
as far as I know, he's still out there. But I changed his name. He's not called Wolverine. He's called Poison. He was never called Wolverine in my book. He was always called Jimmy.
Well, if you pick up X-Men, and I stopped reading X-Men like about a year ago or something like that. It just got, or no, earlier this year. This lead up to the last 6 months were irritating to me. Too dark for me. But then I picked up the Gala, and I found out sometime in between there that Laura has a new code name.
What's her name?
Talon.
Good name.
Because they're it's fine, but they're referring to this character as Talon the whole time. I'm like, what the hell is Talon?
Here I am saying, man, I sure wish characters weren't the same name. And yet, it's time for me to be hypocritical. So I just watched Shin Kamen Rider it's streaming on which is a reinvention of the old Kamen Rider show. And it's interesting. I knew nothing about Kamen Rider going into this. And there's multiple Kamen Riders. And I forgot that I didn't, I think I knew tangentially. But it's a world full of Kamen Riders. They're all over the place. And then I started thinking about Ultraman. And there's dozens of Ultramans. And I love that nonsense. Absolutely love it. So,
but 8 Supermen?
What's that?
But 8 Supermen is too much.
Well, I liked it when they killed Superman and there were the 4 Supermen who all were trying to be Superman. I like that. I liked it when Superman split into 2 dudes who one was lightning and one was red lightning.
So stupid.
Actually, I didn't read that. I was working at a comic shop when that came out. I remember that, but I didn't.
I skipped over a lot of that, but
so maybe it's all fine. Maybe it's all how it's handled. Maybe it's how it's handled.
There's always a point where you feel like you're that old man chasing children off of your lawn. Why isn't it the way I like it? Well, good luck with Earth. It's not the way you'll ever like it.
I can promise you for the near future, after that damn movie this year, we're going to get all the Spider-Man we can handle for all time.
Yeah. I mean,
Columbia is going apeshit.
Yeah.
I mean, if not for the strike, you'd see a half dozen Spider-Man licensed movies.
Well, what shocks me is I would have never believed that storyline would be accepted by the general public.
Sure.
And by kids.
And embraced.
Yeah. And embraced. They love it. And I would have never thought it. I would have never thought they'd have. But then again, it's all about how well they've done it. I mean,
I mean, you tried to tell people about the Crisis on Infinite Earths, right? When you were a kid, you tried to tell people that, and they're like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, non-readers, the concept of a multiverse.
But I do remember trying to tell people about Crisis on Infinite, but I also remember just saying, and then Flash run on a treadmill, he turns into a skeleton.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story about Crisis real quick. They had Marv up there talking to like the merchandising folks because they wanted to get some merchandising action going on Crisis. So he's there explaining the whole plot to Crisis on Infinite Earths. Obviously, this is a very long time ago when Marv was just a child. And people are beginning to laugh because they're not comic book people and they're not reading these comics. They didn't grow up reading these comics. Some were, and that's great. They weren't laughing. And after a while, you realize, like, these people don't get it. They're not trying to get it. They don't understand. All they're doing is dealing with the absurdities. And turning the absurdities into good stories is what we do for a living. You know?
I gotta write that down. I like that.
And the fact that Marv probably didn't have a gun on him at the time, but he didn't just shoot them all down. You wouldn't do that today. We got semi-automatics and stuff. You wouldn't take the risk.
Yeah.
So there.
All I know is I loved it. And Flash turned into a skeleton. He ran so fast. That's a fast running dude.
That's true.
I mean, I feel like I'm turning into a skeleton when I walk across. I walk a mile. I'm like, oh, I'm about to turn into a skeleton.
But the thing about comics is that they all right. So yes, Barry turned into a skeleton and drove through time and like was that Phantom that we saw leading up a month. But when Wally found his costume, I cried. I remember I was devastated at the loss that he had felt.
Yeah.
I wasn't even a DC guy at the time. I was a Teen Titans guy. That was what I liked. That's what I was really into.
Mm-hmm.
And Legion of Superheroes. I like Legion of Superheroes and Teen Titans, but other than that, I wasn't a DC guy.
Those are the books I read.
And they were, in my opinion, I'll stand by it that I think they were two of the best in the '80s. Were two of the best written comics and best illustrated comics in.
Don't tell Paul that.
Well, I love it. I love it.
All right.
But yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this, Cullen. We really had a great time.
Happy to have been here.
We will look forward to all the new stuff coming out. As I said, Hardest American Man in Comics, and just so prolific and so excellent at what you do. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a fun.
Cullen, I look forward to meeting you in real life.
Me too. Yeah. I don't know how many conventions. I know Bob does conventions. That's where I see him. But
right, well, we got to get you to Baltimore because he'll definitely be in Baltimore. So you're gonna come back to Baltimore. Not this year, I don't think.
That was a fun show.
So. All right. Thanks so much for doing this, and we'll be in touch.
Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for watching and listening.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you being here.
All right. Take care.
Okay. All right.
All right. So we are on a roll, my friend. We have shows lined up every Tuesday night. We will be here. If anybody is still watching, hopefully, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel because then you'll know that when we go live. If you don't get the alerts, because social media is a mess, as we just mentioned. And I want to really quick. Next week we are going to have a special guest. We're going to have Will Dennis, editor extraordinaire, and founding editor of Distillery. We're going to talk about comics. Will's a great guy. We're going to talk about The Devil's Cut. Did you get it yet? Did I send it to you yet?
No.
Okay, so I will send that to you. So we'll talk about that because that is, I think, coming out in comic book stores at the end of the month. But it was first released in San Diego. We'll talk about what's going on with Distillery. We'll talk about what's going on in the rest of the books that Will's working on, which is a lot. And we'll probably maybe talk about music because I'm sure you guys can talk about that and just go crazy because he's a huge, I don't know if you know this about Will. huge, punk and new wave kind of guy. So
Me too, but my tastes in music are quite broad.
oh sure, I understand that. I'm just
So,
saying that's his
but
jam.
I punk rock saved the genre, saved rock and roll. So, God bless the Ramones and the Clash. We'll pick up on that next week.
Sounds great. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. I'm gonna play our little goodbye show, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Take it easy, folks.
This has been a production on the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?